How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Seeker of the Unknown. I know it's been a while. Yeah, well, we're here, and hopefully today we're going to have a great story to tell, and we're going to try and look and see what the facts, if not anything, is rooted in actual fact. We are going to be taking a look at the Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, if you haven't heard about this epic, this great story coming out of ancient Mesopotamia, out of the city of Uruk, it is something that's really fascinating, and we're going to get into that here in a little bit. But we're also going to be touching on the similarities between this Epic of Gilgamesh and the stories that we see in the Old Testament, uh, referring to the information of Noah getting the information from God to build a ship because he is going to destroy humanity. Now, when we look at the similarities between the two, as I always say, look into it for yourself. I'm just going to be passing this information on to you. And this is going to be a good one. And I hope you join me for this. And we are going to be talking about this as much as we can and get as much information as possible. And let's dive into it and let's see what we can get out of it, shall we? All right, all right. We are back. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today, as I said before, is the. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Um, we are going to be getting into this. Try and find something I can put this on. See if this will work. Hopefully that'll help. You guys can hear me a little bit better. Um, we're going to be diving into this. The Epic of Gilgamesh really intrigued me, as I said before, when I started looking into ancient history and culture and trying to find similarities. Because, as I said, I'm not going to denounce anybody's faith. I am not going to sit here and tell anybody, well, you're wrong, I'm right. That's not what I'm bringing to the table. What I'm doing is I'm saying there's more to the scope of what is happening here, and we're seeing similarities in chapters of history that are far older than what we've been told, and the Epic of Gilgamesh happens to be one of these stories. Now, the similarities between these two narratives of the flood story that we're going to be talking about in the Epic of Gilgamesh story and the flood narrative that we're seeing in the Old Testament by God giving these commandments to Noah, and in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we find that it is Utnapishtim. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm probably slaughtering the crap out of it, but Utnapishtim is given instructions by the gods to create a ship as well, because he is being told that Earth is going to be destroyed by a flood. Now, if that's not catching your eye about similarities right off the bat, it's going to get a lot interesting as we start diving into what we're going to be taking a look at here. So, let me pull up some paperwork here, because as I said, I don't want you just taking my word for it. There is a bunch of information, okay, that you can research and find on your own, because as I said, this is something that is not just coming recently, okay? This is old stuff. All right, so Let me get in here. All right. So as we're about to, I'm going to go over with you guys right now is, and if you want to chat, I am on YouTube. So if you want to post anything on YouTube, I will get a hold of you on there. If you guys want to chat, let me see if it's going through on the Facebook channel. I don't think it is. Looks like it might be. Let me see. No, it is not. All right. If you want to get a hold of me, you can on YouTube because that's where it's actually streaming. Um, and you can comment in the YouTube portion in the comments right there down below. You'll see it. Comments. Just go ahead and type in your questions or just say, hey, what's going on? And don't forget to subscribe and like the channel, please. The more likes and more subscriptions we get, the more help it's going to be with getting the information that we're talking about on our platform here. Whoops. On Facebook. So on Facebook and YouTube. And also, don't forget, we are also going to be on, we are actually on live on the podcast on Spotify. So if you want to go there and you can check it out as well. All right. So let's get into this, shall we? The Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, we're going to go over 10 interesting points and then I'm going to jump into it and start talking about some of the similarities that we see during the Old Testament of Gilgamesh and trying to find I'm not going to get into it. Let's start off in the beginning. All right. So as we see in the Epic of Gilgamesh, this narration in this story stands out as one of the most earliest known pieces of writings in human history. Okay. It is an epic poem which narrates the story of life of a man named Gilgamesh, who was in fact the king of Uruk, all right, in a majestic Sumerian city that is located in present-day Iraq. And you can actually go to Uruk. I posted a video on my Facebook page. You could check that out. There was a woman who actually got to go visit there. She traveled to Uruk, got to walk around on the very site where King Gilgamesh was the king of, in the actual citadel site in the city, which you can actually see the flooring. The buildings are still up. Some of the walling is still there, and it is just fascinating. This is one of the things that I always say I'm always fascinated by, is because I love history. I love history, because if you want to learn anything about how to deal with things in your present, look at your history and try not to repeat it. So that's one of the things that I always try and tell everybody, is that these narrations and these stories that we hear of always have a tale or something that can be narrated into what we see in present day. So let's get into this again. As I said, the King Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, a majestic city in Sumerian in Mesopotamia that is located in Iraq. The historic piece of poetic literature actually predates Homer's earliest writings, about 1,500 years or so. For this reason, many historians have put it as the oldest remaining remnant of an epic in the history of Western literature. And that's why I say it's really fascinating. If you get a chance to check it out, they do have audio, videos, and little movie clippets that, a lot of people want to see visualizations when they're reading stories. They don't want to sit there and just be reading a book, but they have them on YouTube. You can check it out, and we're going to check out some of those as well. All right. Starting off by introducing this powerful character that we know of as King Gilgamesh, this epic takes the lead characters on an adventure where they learn about life, death, and friendship. Now, the friendship that we're talking about is the friendship between King Gilgamesh and Enkidu, and we're going to get into that right now. The Epic of Gilgamesh primarily revolves around the introduction of Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, and the subsequent events that shape his journey on this epic. King Gilgamesh was born 2/3 god and 1/3 man. Gilgamesh had formidable strength. Okay, if you ever see any of these pictures that he has, or these statues that were erected of him. He is a tall man, and he's sitting here holding, this lion in his arm, like it's just a cat, like how we would hold cats in present day. All right. His intimidating yet appealing physique in early excerpts, he is portrayed as a wise man, building magnificent temples and towers in his Sumerian city surrounded by high walls. But as he realizes, his might was beyond that of an ordinary human. He soon became a cruel tyrant, and he began abusing his people, raping any woman he had his eye on, and forcing people to work on his personal construction projects. To curb Gilgamesh's behavior, the gods created an equally powerful being named Enkidu to fight him. They ended up becoming the best of friends, and so much so that Gilgamesh was devastated when Enkidu died of an illness inflicted by the gods. Unable to grasp the concept of death, that death is really possible, because even though he was 2/3 God and 1/3 man, he was not immortal. Even for the likes of him, death was inevitable. He embarked on a journey to the edge of the world, and on his way, he learns about things beyond the scope of his kingdom, records his knowledge on stone tablets, and these tablets represent the different life lessons in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So this is a little history. Citing the earliest examples of the Epic of Gilgamesh and the myths around Gilgamesh are to be believed, the epic stood right at the top of the great literary masterpieces of ancient times. It is without a doubt a gem in the history of cuneiform literature, a writing system developed by the ancient Sumerians themselves around 3500 to 3000 BC. And I talk about this in some of the early podcasts about the cuneiform tablets, that talk about the creation of man and talk about the sky gods who came down and created us, not literally taking humans and making humans, out of nothing, but using other hominids that were here at the time and mixing it and with their DNA and coming up with what we now know as Homo sapiens. Archaeologists are yet to discover any actual evidence that could date the epic back to its time of origin, but multiple copies of certain snippets of the epic have been found in modern-day Israel, Syria, and Turkey. Furthermore, the main character, Gilgamesh, is mentioned throughout ancient Greek and Roman literature. There are a few surviving cuneiform tablets depicting the epic in these older stone tablets, showcasing the Babylonian version, which dates back well into the 2nd millennium BC. It is only 2/3 complete and presents the story of Gilgamesh in a different light. Then there is the Akkadian version from the early 13th to 10th century BC. It is well until the 7th century that the contemporary historians found the best preserved copies in the ruins of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal's, I can't even say that right, library. Now, the myths surrounding Gilgamesh is also known as Belgamus in Sumerian and Gilgamos in Greek. He was part god, part man. He was the 5th king of the Sumerian city of Uruk, and his life and deeds were so influential that many myths grew about around his achievements among subsequent generations of Sumerians. These myths and stories finally culminated into the Epic of Gilgamesh. The epic describes him as the fierce warrior and audacious architect. Despite having his entire kingdom at his mercy, his kingship was marred by his outrageous antics. He took part in ceaseless battles, enforcing his people to construct endless projects, and also fancied his eye on any woman that he desired. It was only when he befriended an equally powerful being, Enkidu, that his atrocities began to calm down. In Enkidu, Gilgamesh found a true friend and a brother, someone he could trust with his life and confide in his biggest fears too. So when Enkidu died, he had a sudden horrifying realization that death is a destiny he could not escape. And still grieving for his friend, he sets out on a quest to learn the secret of eternal life, abandoning all his glory and power as a king. By the end of this quest, he finds the true harmony lies in accepting how ephemeral life can be, and his happiness depends on how he chooses to reconcile himself with this truth. He then returns to his kingdom with a promise to be a better king and use his divine skills for the greater good of humankind. So now we're going to get into how or who Enkidu is and how he was created by the gods to combat King Gilgamesh. So to counter the ever-growing menace that Gilgamesh was, because you got to remember, this guy knew he was better and he was bigger and he was powerful than any man, and he knew that there was never going to be any rivals. Okay, and as we call them, he was a giant. He was a Nephilim. He was born of a race from the gods, between the relationships between the gods and a human woman, which we know in the Old Testament in biblical terms was um, the fallen ones or the watchers who were here on the earth, and they were mating with women, and their offspring were giants. This is where it becomes interesting, because you see this narrative of the biblical term of how these Nephilim became, and you see this Epic of Gilgamesh of this literal king who was the fifth ruler in this city of Uruk, and his name was Gilgamesh, who was of just that stature. He was a giant. He had a lot of power. He had a lot of knowledge. He ruled this kingdom with an iron fist, and whatever he wanted, he got, and whatever he did, no man could stop him from doing it. So the menace that Gilgamesh was presenting to his people, the gods made Enkidu from water and clay to be equal to Gilgamesh in terms of might and power. But unlike the king of Uruk, Enkidu's early days were spent in the wild. His instincts and lifestyle influenced by the wild animals that raised him for a long time. He remained completely isolated from the civilized world. But gradually, his interactions with humans became more regular as he would free animals trapped by hunters. Eventually, he abandoned his life in the wild and headed for the city of Uruk. It is said that in reaching Uruk, Enkidu wrestled with Gilgamesh as a test of his strength. Now, see, this story tells just a real quick snippet of how he became civilized and gradually went into civilization. But what is said is that Gilgamesh heard of this being. He didn't know anything of him, but he knew he was around because people were coming out and saying, hey, there's this other creature that looks like he can match the king. So Gilgamesh sends out this woman who was under his house, under his roof, which was one of his, I guess you could call wives, and told him, hey, go find out what's going on with this guy. So she goes out and finds him, seduces him for 7 days, and pretty much tames him and has relations with him and confides in him and tells him, hey, you don't have to live out here by yourself. So she takes him to the city, clothes him, teaches him how to be human, and teaches him how to, coexist with the people within the city of Uruk or around the city walls. So this is where you get the wrestling of Gilgamesh, is that Enkidu was going to marry this woman. Gilgamesh steps in and says, hey, hold on, I'm the king. If you're going to marry this woman, I'm going to have first dibs on her before you end up having her. So that's where the fight turns into, or the fight between Enkidu and Gilgamesh happens. And this is something that is lasting for, said to have been up to a week, that they had destroyed many of the palace's buildings within the courtyard. They were matching each other blow for blow. Enkidu didn't even want to back down. And Gilgamesh was the first one to throw the blow, because Enkidu stepped in front of him and was pretty much like, well, what are you going to do about it? You need to chill out. Because he had heard about the things that Gilgamesh was doing, the atrocities with his people and making them slave to build things for him, and the mistreatment that he was putting them under. And not only that, but his lust and his obsession for mistreating the women who were within his kingdom and just doing whatever he wanted with them. And now you have Enkidu and his future bride, and King Gilgamesh is telling him, hey, you're going to do what I'm telling you to do because I'm the king and I'm going to have her. And Enkidu stepping up in front of him and telling him, no, you're not. So Enkidu and King Gilgamesh wrestled as a test of strength, but soon they became good friends. So much so that Gilgamesh soon regarded him as a brother and an equal and part of his conscience. In a way, Enkidu does fulfill the purpose of his creation by reducing Gilgamesh's atrocities with his friendship. As a true brother in arms, Enkidu inspires King Uruk to become the perfect leader he could once have been. However, things take a desperate turn when Enkidu, together with Gilgamesh, slay the god of Earth's Enlil's servant, Humbaba. So now, like I said, this story is just I'm just telling you the quick version of it. So what happens is that Enkidu and Gilgamesh at the time are setting out into the wild. They're going hunting, and they go out into the wilderness. And Humbaba, who is a fierce demon, confronts them and is like, "What are you doing in my domain? Why are you here?" So they look at each other and they're like, "Well, we're going to kill this guy or this demon, this entity. We're going to kill it cuz together we can face anything." So they wrestle with this demon and they start, trying to kill it. And finally Gilgamesh grabs the demon as it's trying to fight with him, and it's said that Enkidu jumps up on its shoulders and stabs him through the neck, killing the demon Humbaba with his spear. The demon falls down, okay? The demon is struck down with an illness or it says he faces the wrath of Ishtar and is struck down with an illness that slowly poisons his body, ultimately leading to his death. Now, the poison that gets into his body in various versions, but the version that I seen was is that Humbaba, as he was laying there dying, told them, "Because you have done this to me, one of you is going to die a horrible death." And the gods, seeing that Gilgamesh and Enkidu together have slain one of their deities, curses Enkidu with a poison in his body that slowly kills him. And this is where you start getting into the point of Gilgamesh trying to look for a cure for death, which is immortality. And it is said that long before the time of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim ruled as the king and high priest of the city of Shuruppak. He was chosen by the god Enki. Listen to this, because this is getting into Gilgamesh's epic to find immortality. And Utnapishtim, the similarities between the two Old Testament figure and Utnapishtim is very, very coincidental. He was chosen by the god Enki to abandon all his possessions and create a giant ship so as to survive the impending great flood that would wipe out all existence on the planet. It is very obvious to anybody who can see the similarities between Utnapishtim's life and the story of Noah's Ark. Regardless of the moral dilemma of having to leave his neighbors and friends to die, Utnapishtim's loyalty completed the task set out before him by the god Enki. He and his wife were granted immortality and placed among the gods. In the sorrow over the death of Enkidu and the fear of the inevitable, the death that awaited him, Gilgamesh was keen to find Utnapishtim. He believed that since Utnapishtim was given eternal life by the gods, he too would be able to guide him to immortality as well. When they finally met, Utnapishtim tried to convince Gilgamesh to abandon his quest and live a happy life as a mortal man, but he also told him about a magical plant that could possibly help him gain eternal life. Now this is going into Siduri, the tavern keeper of the underworld. In his pursuit of Utnapishtim, at one point on his journey, Gilgamesh ended up at the gates of the underworld. This is where he meets Siduri, a tavern keeper in the underworld. Different versions of this epic is given different accounts of the interaction between the two, Siduri and Gilgamesh. Also known as the goddess of winemaking and brewing, Siduri rather alarmed when Gilgamesh threatens to smash the tavern into pieces if she does not help him in his quest. In the beginning, Siduri tries her best to talk Gilgamesh out of his search for eternal life, a quest that she believes is a fool's errand. Ultimately, she sends him to Ushanabi, the boatman, whose help was essential to him to succeed his search. Now, you see that Gilgamesh, ultimately is trying to find his eternal life remedy by going and finding these gods and trying to find a way to beat death. And the one way he was trying to do it was because he wanted to resurrect his friend Enkidu. And you find different versions in the Babylonian version, the Greek version, the Turkish version. Um, the earlier or older version, okay, is the Babylonian version. Okay, it's the oldest cuneiform tablets inscribed with the details of the epic dating back to 2000 to 1500 BC. Is the olden Babylonian version of the epic, and it is, however, considered incomplete, and some of the tablets are missing, and the discovered ones have definite gaps in the narration. Historians actually believe that the epic could date back even further than this version. Altogether, there are 8 different tablets in the Old Babylonian version. Each tablet takes its name from its current location from its old place of discovery. Now you have the standard Akkadian version, and this is by far the more popular one and well-preserved version composed by Sanlik Unini somewhere between 13 to 1000 BC in contemporary Mesopotamia. It was discovered by Harmaza Razam in the ruins of the library of Ushurbanipal in Nineveh. The standard Akkadian and Old Babylonian versions have 2 different and distinct opening phrases in cuneiform text. These opening words are not as incipit. The incipit in the Old Babylonian version opens with the words surpassing all other kings, whereas in the standard version it says, "He who saw the deep." In the second phrase, the word deep is translated from the Akkadian word Nagbu, which linguists have interpreted as having the meaning of unknown mysteries. The standard Akkadian version consists of 11 tablets that map the entire story of Gilgamesh's life from his birth to his friendship with Enkidu and then his eventual journey in the search of eternal life. The final tablet concludes that the epic retelling how Gilgamesh attains the knowledge to worship the gods and decides to live the rest of his life virtuously as a wise king. A 12th tablet was added to the Akkadian version at a later date and is a sequel to the original 11. Now you see the biblical references between the two of Gilgamesh and the Hebrew Bible have striking similarity themes and storylines. Perhaps the best known event that occurs across the narratives of the two is the flood story. The epic flood story pans out almost exactly like the tale of Noah's Ark in the Bible. Similarities do not end there. Events from the epic's Ark story are very close to the episode in the Bibles of Genesis, such as the serpent who misses his chance at grabbing the plant of eternal life, and Gilgamesh's ultimate realization that mortal life can be meaningful only if he truly accepts his humanity. That being said, there are differences in the story as well. For example, the Bible, Noah takes 100 years to build the ark, whereas in the epic, Unapishtim had only 7 days to complete it. Similarly, where it rained nonstop for 40 days in the Bible, it only rained for 7 days in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So you see that ultimately Gilgamesh ends up finding the secret of immortality, which is from a plant. Now, he goes back home and to Uruk, and he becomes a wiser and more greater king, treating his people as they should be treated, understanding that the needs of his people should be met first with kindness, humbleness, and being an obedient king to the people. Just because he was a great half god, half man being doesn't mean that he had to dominate his people with an iron fist. He realized after going on his epic and attaining the knowledge of immortality, so it's said, we find later on that was this true. In 2003, a tomb was found in Iraq by a couple of archaeologists who were at the time working for whatever government they were working for, and supposedly found these stasis chambers of King Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Now, I had posted a video of this before, and I'm gonna get this video right now and post it. Let me see if I can grab it really quick, and we'll play it, and you guys can check it out. Mm-mm-mm. Trying to see. Here it is. I'll pause it, and then we'll take a look at it. All right, let's do this. Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. We'll switch it back to the smaller one. So as you see, requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh of his body and the location of buried Nephilim. Those are documented papers that were given and shown that it actually, in fact, had happened. The government. This is the chamber, supposedly, of a top view. Now, I'm going to pause this real quick. In this video, as I said, you can take it for what you want, or, a lot of people believe it, a lot of people don't. As for myself, I know seeing things or being there in Iraq and being in places of holy sites where we were allowed to see things which other people in the West would never be able to see. I mean, you have all these scholars and these people who are religious, talking about these sites where Abraham walked, and you have burial sites of Joseph, and the prophet Daniel. Seeing these areas where these people lived and actually experiencing it for yourself, you got to remember something. During that time in 2003 was the invasion, the war in Iraq was going on. A lot of holy sites were being demolished. A lot of holy sites were being raided. Things were being taken out of the country. This find was of such significance, not only to the West, but to the people in Iraq. Why? Because this is one of the kings who was said to have had blood ties not only to Saddam Hussein, but you see that Saddam Hussein had built up or was trying to rebuild Babylon because of his bloodline, saying that he was the actual, in fact, ruler with the ties going all the way back to Gilgamesh. So just throwing that in there, but you see that these archaeologists, these people who were going into this tomb, you see this body here in this stasis chamber. This is into the ground. Okay. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it talks about when King Gilgamesh was buried, that to achieve immortality, he was just going to sleep. His body was being in a preservative stasis chamber that was given to him. The gods showed him how to build this thing. He went into this chamber, was placed in it, and would fall asleep. And when the time of his coming was to come back, he would be resurrected as if he was just sleeping. Which is very interesting, because when they show you the videos of this chamber being opened, you will see the craziness of what he looks like. So let's take a look again. Let's keep going. Ooh, that's good. Oh, this is so fascinating. And as you see throughout the video, the people are showing their look at this. One of the things that people were talking about were these objects that were in his tomb. And as you look at them, what are some of the things that you notice about the striking similarities of Egyptian looking headdresses? And here you have the men who are licensed and showing their paperwork of who they are on the find with the dates of the paperwork. Now, this blanket or whatever, this gold lined sheet that is placed on him to cover his parts while he was in the chamber, it looks like a golden woven fabric of some sort. And here again, you have statues that are depictive of what look like Egyptian artifacts, which is very interesting, because we know that Gilgamesh traveled throughout the world looking for the secret of immortality. Could he have possibly been to these other regions of the world while on his epic? But they were saying that the size of this man was enormous. At least a good 12 to 14 feet tall. Here you go again, showing a newspaper date. Just giving some reference, way people, can't say, oh, well, it's fake, or, the timing, etc., etc. And notice his hair was still growing. This stasis chamber that he is laying in is something that we also find in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, who we also known was a knowledgeable figure in Egyptian lore, that talks about being in a stasis chamber as well, and staying in this chamber only to revive his body for the time when he was ready to come out of said stasis chamber, be resurrected. And here you have a king being given this same knowledge. What a coincidence, right? Now, as I said before, I hate the term conspiracy theorist. I gotta remember that at this time, as I said before, we were in Iraq, and to find all these artifacts and these, um, this place being so rich in history and culture, the government was said to have gone in and tried to get their hands on as much of this stuff as possible. I mean, wouldn't it be fascinating to get your hands on a stasis chamber? And not only that, to get your hands on the body of one of the greatest known historical figures of our time, to gather information from this being as much as they possibly could, possibly to even extract DNA from his body, to mix it and try and genetically alter it or fix it with something else to make hybrids. I mean, this man is well over what, 5,000 years old, even older, to look like that. No deterioration of the skin. Look at that gold weaving in the fabric. How crazy is that? And it's said that when Gilgamesh died, he was buried with, because they were friends and they wanted to be together in the afterlife. And the next body that they go is completely different, but the body's eyes are open. I think that is a sword. They were trying to. Yeah, here's the next one. And you see this gold plate on his body that's laying on him with these cuneiformic, this thing on this gold plate. Looks like a chest plate, I think, or a shield. There's so much stuff in, or is still in Iraq, in that area of the world that is hidden from us, that we are not able to in the West go and conduct archaeological digging. There are sites that still have not been excavated yet. Even the city of Uruk, it's said that the site itself is just sitting there laden with so many artifacts that are just found. You could pick them up, literally pottery and hand, and the site has not yet been fully. There's nobody allowed to go in there, and it's such a shame, because you can only imagine the artifacts and the information, or the, just hidden things that are underneath the ground that have not yet been found. And this was, I mean, look at that chamber. It's made out of a metal, and the lid that they took off of it was made out of some sort of a material. It looked like an emerald or a ruby type lid that they took off of it. But I mean, if you're going to be lace chamber, wouldn't it make sense that you would be in something that would be a conductor to preserve your body and the element keeping all else out? I mean, he's well over what 5,000 years old, and his body looks like he was just laying there asleep. It's really, really fascinating, really cool stuff. Now here we have the body that was there, and this is the body of Enkidu. Notice his body, his coloration of his legs. We see a little bit more deterioration on him for some reason. It might be because he was already dying. He also has a fixated headdress on his head, and look at his eyes are open. How crazy, right? So, as I said, I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I've seen that before. It was said to be fake." Well, obviously, if they're going to find something and it becomes public notice, all right, and it's going to get put out there, that it's probably going to be thrown out into the public. Well, this is a hoax. This isn't real. It's not true. Now, having said that, how much other information out there that we have seen based on what we know and what archaeological digging and people coming out of Iraq, and Turkey and Iran have found so many other artifacts or other things leading that would blow the lid off of the speculation or these theories that are out there that are put out by the mainstream media or these governments to hide the truth. Why? Because they would want to keep it. Think about it. You have the power that this being had, the information and the knowledge to be able to live as an immortal, the technology to be able to put yourself in stasis in the chamber as you see him laying down in a chamber that was going to preserve him in such a way that when he was able to be regenerated, he would be able to sustain his body. Now, when you see the other body, it looks as though the body from the waist down was starting to deteriorate, and that could be possibly be because Enkidu had already died, and King Gilgamesh buried him. When he died, he told them, "I want to be buried with him. Bury my friend, my brother, alongside with me, and bury him like a king." Which is why you've seen him ordained with a crown, and you see him with other artifacts, just as Gilgamesh was buried with the ornaments and ordained with jewelry, as if he was of royalty. Now, looking at this information and seeing the similarities between the Old Testament and the Epic itself, you start to question, okay, if Gilgamesh was on this earth and he was of the old, the world of old, are we not starting to see that the city of Uruk and these cities in Mesopotamia, were these the cities or were these the civilizations that were pre-flood? Were these the sites where God or the gods had seen so many people, they're complaining and they're bickering and their frustration of what was going on with their day-to-day lives and having to put up with everything, that the gods said, okay, we're had enough. We're not going to deal with this anymore. We're just going to send a flood to just wipe everything out. What information or what historical artifacts would still be there if these sites were in fact pre-flood, okay? Or if these civilizations were the beginning of the after the flood, because you have Unapishtim who says that he was given immortality, and when Gilgamesh finds him, he's telling him, the gods bestowed immortality on me, and he told me to build an ark because he was going to make it rain. And in the story of Unapishtim, it was only 7 days, but in the Bible, it was 40 days and 40 nights. And in the story, he tells of everything. Let's see if I have that. I think I do. Give me a second. Let's close that one. Close that one. All right, let's see. All nope, I don't want that one. Here we go. All right, let's check this one out real quick, and then
who abuses his power and oppresses his people. To tame his arrogance, the gods created a wild man named Enkidu, who becomes Gilgamesh's companion and equal. Together, they embark on a series of adventures, including slaying the monstrous Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven. However, after the death of Enkidu, Gilgamesh becomes obsessed with the idea of immortality and embarks on a journey to find a man named Utnapishtim, who is said to have achieved eternal life. After a long and arduous quest, Gilgamesh finally achieves his goal and successfully discovers the location of Utnapishtim.
excuse me. Now think about this, okay? If there was no evidence or no correlation to say that the story of the flood was actually even real, if people want to say, oh, well, it was fake, or this has no credibility, why would there be a story of a king of this stature who was said to be half human, or one third, or a third god, and the other portion human, who was dealing with all this stuff, all these stories that he was dealing with, going and looking for this person who was known, okay? It's not like they just came up with a name and was like, oh, well, go find this. I don't know what the hell his name is. I don't know. Supposedly there was a flood that happened, and there was a guy that was named Unapishtim who was given immortality, I guess. Could be real, could not be. You just don't give somebody, especially a person who's a king, who's looking for this information that is known to people. So obviously, right? These people had records of this before. It was a part of their history. It was a part of the culture of what was going on in the past around in that area. So they knew of it and they had record of it because somebody had to have told them, hey, look, there's history of this man who had immortality. He was given to it by the gods and he'd survived the flood. So there's got to be some hint of truth to what we are hearing in this Epic of Gilgamesh and his search for the discovery of immortality.
Gilgamesh inquires of him as to how he obtained eternal life. The following is Utnapishtim's response.
Now, the way they narrate this, the words are kind of iffy, so I'm gonna put the subtitles on, and if you need to, I'll put the link in the comments here, and you can.
Utnapishtim said to Gilgamesh, I will reveal to you a mystery, I will tell you a secret of the gods. You know the city Sharapak, it stands on the banks of Euphrates. That city grew old and the gods that were in it were old. There was Anu, lord of the firmament, their father, and warrior Enlil their counselor, Nanurta the helper, and Inugi watcher over canals, and with them also was A. In those days the world teemed, the people multiplied, the world bellowed like a wild bull, and the great god was aroused by the clamor. Enlil heard the clamor and he said to the gods in council, the uproar of mankind is intolerable and sleep is no longer possible by reason of the babble. So the gods agreed to exterminate mankind. Enlil did this, but A because of his oath warned me in a dream.
So, as I've talked about before in the other podcasts and the other episodes that I've done on the Anunnaki, you have Enki and Lil, and you have their father Anu. And their father Anu, who he's talking about in this, is called says to them, Enki and them are saying, we can't listen to these people anymore because they're babbling and they're crying and they're being, complainers about everything. In that story, in the Anunnaki, the story of the Anunnaki destroying humankind because they were their creation. They created these Homo sapiens from other Homo sapiens. Okay, they weren't quite like who we are. They did not have the knowledge or the power or the insight and the intelligence that we know of as Homo sapiens now. There were other, like you see in historical aspects, these beings that were here, that were on this planet. The Anunnaki took their DNA and were matching it with them. So part of us, as you know, I mean, I'm getting into this now, is you have Greg Braden's book, The God Code. Okay, if you haven't read it, I suggest you do, or if you have not looked at Greg Braden and know who he is, I would suggest you look him up because, as I said before, a lot of this stuff is not just coincidence. You see that the gods are imprinting themselves on humankind's DNA. And Greg Braden says there's got to be something more to this because you find genes that separate us from other beings. Okay, there are also genes that shut off, kind of like a forgetful gene, to where we are not able to remember past point in humankind, or we are not able to uh, have long lives. That keeps us, there's a gene that keeps us from growing older. So he started looking into this, and what he found through doing his research is that the gods actually imprinted their name on our DNA. Hi, baby. And that is really fascinating because that lends credibility to say, okay, there has to be something more to what we were being told. Not only that, but the adaptation of these stories from ancient times to what we now see in biblical narrative, because you now know that those stories were passed down through the ages through these groups, okay, and the ancestors of these people into what we now know as the Israelite story of the creation by God making human civilizations on earth. They just adapted it from what their people were telling them, and it was from something that was very ancient, very old. So it makes you think, is there some credibility to what we are seeing here? Greg Braden thinks that yes, there has to be some credibility to what we're seeing in this Epic of Gilgamesh and the Sumerian tablets of creation and the Anunnaki and the gods who came down from the sky, created human beings, giving us the ability and the tools and the knowledge of what we were able to do because they made us to serve them. And now that we started becoming unruly, as it says that Anapishtim is telling them, they decided to destroy us because they were getting so tired of it. So what did they do? They left and told him, look, not him, but Anu, the father god of Enki and Enlil, came to him in a dream and said, hey, listen, we have left. Now we're going to leave this place, but we're going to destroy this creation. But we have found favor in you enough that we want you to build an ark, a ship. And we're going to cause this flood to destroy all of creation, but we want you to survive and we're going to give you immortality. Check it out.
He whispered their words to my house of reeds, reed house, reed house. Wall, O wall, hearken reed house, wall reflect, O man of Sharapak, son of Yubara Tutu, tear down your house and build a boat, abandon possessions and look for life, despise worldly goods and save your soul alive. Tear down your house, I say, and build a boat. These are the measurements of the bark as you shall build her, let hex beam equal her length, let her deck be roofed like the vault that covers the abyss, then take up into the boat the seed of all living creatures. When I had understood, I said to my Lord.
Now you hear what he says, take unto your ship the seed of all living creatures. He doesn't say grab all the animals and bring them onto the ship. There's no freaking way he would have been able to bring all the animals onto the ship. He told them, go out and collect the seed of all living creatures. Now that makes more sense if he's able to extract DNA from these animals, keep it, store it on the ships, so that way they can come back again and regenerate them from the DNA, right? So that would make more sense than this narrative that we see passed on later on, because they're going, okay, we'll gather all the living creatures onto the ship and bring them on board. There's no way. There's no way.
Behold, what you have commanded I will honor and perform, but how shall I answer the people, the city, the elders? Then A opened his mouth and said to me, his servant, tell them this, I have learnt that Enlil is wrathful against me, I dare no longer walk in his land nor live in his city, I will go down to the gulf to dwell with A my lord. But on you he will rain down abundance, rare fish and shy wild fowl, a rich harvest tide. In the evening the rider of the storm will bring you wheat in torrents. In the first light of dawn all my household gathered round me, the children brought pitch and the men whatever was necessary. On the 5th day I laid the keel and the ribs, then I made fast the planking. The ground space was 1 acre, each side of the deck measured 120 cubits, making a square. I built 6 decks below, 7 in all.
So now you hear him laying out the dimensions of this ship that was a cube. It's not what we think as we see in biblical narrative that adapted this of a long ship, but it was a cube with 6 decks, 120 cubits. Now, if I don't know what the measurements are on that, but I'll look it up and get back to you on it. But let's check out the rest of it.
Divided them into 9 sections with bulkheads between. I drove in wedges where needed, I saw to the punt poles, and laid in supplies. The carriers brought oil in baskets, I poured pitch into the furnace and asphalt and oil, more oil was consumed in caulking, and more again the master of the boat took into his stores. I slaughtered bullocks for the people, and every day I killed sheep. I gave the shipwrights wine to drink as though it were river water, raw wine and red wine and oil and white wine. There was feasting then as there is at the time of the New Year's festival, I myself anointed my head. On the 7th day the boat was complete. Then was the launching full of difficulty, there was shifting of ballast above and below till 2/3 was submerged. I loaded into her all that I had of gold and of living things, my family, my kin, the beast of the field both wild and tame, and all the craftsmen. I sent them on board, for the time that Shamash had ordained was already fulfilled when he said, in the evening, when the rider of the storm sends down the destroying rain, enter the boat and batten her down. The time was fulfilled, the evening came, the rider of the storm sent down the rain. I looked out at the weather and it was terrible, so I too boarded the boat and battened her down. All was now complete, the battening and the caulking, so I handed the tiller to Puzur Amuri the steersman, with the navigation and the care of the whole boat.
So he gives the names
With
of
the
the
first
people on
light
the
of
boat with
dawn,
him.
a black cloud came from the horizon, it thundered within, where Adad, lord of the storm, was riding. In front over hill and plain Shulat and Honish, heralds of the storm, led on. Then the gods of the abyss rose up, Nergal pulled out the dams of the nether waters, Nanurta the war lord threw down the dikes, and the 7 judges of hell, the Anunnaki, raised their torches, lighting the land with their livid flame. A
Wow.
stupor of despair went up to heaven when the god of the storm turned daylight to darkness, when he smashed the land like a cup. One whole day the tempest raged, gathering fury as it went. It poured over the people like the tides of battle, a man could not see his brother nor the people be seen from heaven. Even the gods were terrified at the flood, they fled to the highest heaven, the firmament of An. They crouched against the walls, cowering like curs. Then Ishtar the sweet-voiced queen of heaven cried out like a woman in travail. Alas, the days of old are turned to dust because I commanded evil. Why did I command thus evil in the council of all the gods? I commanded wars to destroy the people, but are they not my people? For I brought them forth. Now like the spawn of fish they float in the ocean. The great gods of heaven and of hell wept, they covered their mouths. For 6 days and 6 nights the winds blew, torrent and tempest and flood overwhelmed the world, tempest and flood raged together like warring hosts. When the 7th day dawned, the storm from the south subsided, the sea grew calm, the flood was stilled, I looked at the face of the world and there was silence, all mankind was turned to clay. The surface of the sea stretched as flat as a rooftop, I opened a hatch and the light fell on my face. Then I bowed low, I sat down and I wept. The tears streamed down my face, for on every side was the waste of water. I looked for land in vain, but 14 leagues distant there appeared a mountain, and there the boat grounded. On the mountain of Nizza the boat held fast, she held fast and did not budge. One day she held, and a second day on the mountain of Nizza she held fast and did not budge. A third day, and a fourth day she held fast on the mountain and did not budge. A 5th day and a 6th day she held fast on the mountain. When the 7th day dawned I loosed a dove and let her go. She flew away, but finding no resting place she returned. Then I loosed a swallow, and she flew away but finding no resting place she returned. I loosed a raven, she saw that the waters had retreated, she ate, she flew around, she cawed, and she did not come back. Then I threw everything open to the 4 winds, I made a sacrifice and poured out a libation on the mountain top. 7 and again 7 cauldrons I set up on their stands, I heaped up wood and cane and cedar and myrtle. When the gods smelled the sweet savor, They gathered like flies over the sacrifice. Then, at last, Ishtar also came. She lifted her necklace with the jewels of heaven that once Anu had made to please her. O you gods here present, by the lapis lazuli round my neck I shall remember these days as I remember.
So now you see the very similarities that you hear in the Old Testament about when he opened to rest on a mountaintop. He saw the mountaintop. It was just enough that the ship got stuck on it and it didn't move. So he sent out a bird. Nothing came back. Sent out a raven or a dove. Nothing. And it came back. Sent out a raven. It saw that the waters had receded and it didn't come back. And now he's making an offering to the gods and, pretty much pleading with them, like, making a sacrifice. They all gather around. And Ishtar, the wife of Anu, has this beautiful necklace that's around her neck that she raises. And what do we think of? I mean, if you're thinking of a necklace that she has made, it's probably got a bunch of different colored rubies on it that are beautiful. And now you're seeing that she's saying, holding this necklace like a rainbow and telling the gods to remember this day as a day of reckoning.
The jewels of my throat, these last days I shall not forget. Let all the gods gather round the sacrifice, except Enlil. He shall not approach this offering, for without reflection he brought the flood, he consigned my people to destruction. When Enlil had come, when he saw the boat, he was wroth and swelled with anger at the gods, the host of heaven. Has any of these mortals escaped? Not one was to have survived the destruction. Then the god of the wells and canals Ninurta opened his mouth and said to the warrior Enlil, who is there of the gods that can devise without A? It is A alone who knows all things. Then A opened his mouth and spoke to warrior Enlil. Wisest of gods, hero Enlil, how could you so senselessly bring down the flood? Lay upon the sinner his sin. Lay upon the transgressor his transgression. Punish him a little when he breaks loose, do not drive him too hard or he perishes. Would that a lion had ravaged mankind rather than the flood. Would that a wolf had ravaged mankind rather than the flood. Would that famine had wasted the world rather than the flood. Would that pestilence had wasted mankind rather than the flood. It was not I that revealed the secret of the gods, the wise man learned it in a dream. Now take your counsel what shall be done with him. Then Enlil went up into the boat, he took me by the hand and my wife and made us enter the boat and kneel down on either side, he standing between us. He touched our foreheads to bless us saying, in time past Utnapishtim was a mortal man, henceforth he and his wife shall live in the distance at the mouth of the rivers. Thus it was that the gods took me and placed me here to live in the distance, at the mouth of the rivers. After speaking with Utnapishtim, Gilgamesh sets out on a journey to find a plant that can restore youth. He successfully retrieves the plant from the bottom of the sea but loses it to a serpent while he is bathing. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, reflecting on the futility of his quest for immortality. In the end, he comes to accept his mortality and finds peace in the knowledge that his deeds and achievements will live on through the legacy he leaves behind.
So as you hear in this story that is told in the Epic of Gilgamesh, that Utnapishtim is telling Gilgamesh the story of how human beings were destroyed in the flood by the god Enki, who was so upset and so mad about what was going on with them. And after the fact of the matter, the gods had came and were surrounding the boat with Utnapishtim and were telling Enki, why would you do, Anu, the god, their father, was telling him, what you did was pretty senseless. Could we not have just put a lion or something to destroy mankind? Would it not have been sensible to have a pestilence come down and just wipe them out? Could we have had something else besides you sending a flood and opening up the earth and the waters swallowing up mankind? It seems that the gods were not happy with what Enki had done to destroy humankind. And we see Ishta, who is telling him, hey, look, this sign and this symbol of what our father Anu, has given me and shown us, it's very precious to me and is my offering to Unapishtim and the descendants of him, that this will not happen again. We will not allow this to become what has happened. And it's the very same thing that you see in the Bible where, God puts this rainbow in the sky and he says that, no matter what, that he will never ever destroy mankind again or flood it to destroy mankind. So we see in both similarities of the Old Testament and also in the Epic of Gilgamesh by the story being told of Anupishtim that the gods or the creators that seen the destruction of what had happened to human beings, that human beings, the creations that the gods had created, they loved their creation. They were happy of their creation. Yes, the lamentation of the people and the cries and the bickering and the moaning, why do we have to do this? Why are we living here? Why are you guys putting us through this? They were tired of it. But it was the actions of the god Enki where he just got full of rage and he was just acting out on that rage and he destroyed mankind by putting out this flood. They came to and were in shock of what was happening, because it says Anupishtim was saying that, hey, the gods went into the firmament and stood on the walls of the firmament and watched what was happening to mankind on the earth and were in shock of what was taking place and what was happening, that they covered their mouth in horror at the actions that Enki had committed. And after the floods had subsided, they had told him, you better make this right. You consorted in doing this without asking our father Anu, who is the master and the head of all things. He is the one who is making everything. You didn't even come and ask him or tell him, hey, should we not do this? So they made him go down, and that's when you hear Anupishtim saying that the Lord Enki came in between him and took him and his wife and stood in between them both and touched their foreheads and said that Anupishtim and his wife, who were of mortal presence before, will now live as immortals and live forever. And he placed them at the mouth of the river that flowed through there. And now you have Gilgamesh, who heard of these stories heard of this person who had immortality and who was able to live forever. And it says that he was given a flower or some type of tree or plant that would give him immortality, and it was in the river, but it was lost to him by a serpent, I believe it said, that came and took it from him, was trying to keep him from getting it. Could that plant, that tree, or whatever it was, could have been something that was at the mouth of the rivers that fed the earth? Could that not be from Eden, what we know of as being at the forefront of where the rivers ran from, because we know in the story of Eden that it was at the beginning of where the rivers flowed out of, the main rivers that flowed through that area. Could this not be something that was given to Gilgamesh that came from there, that sustained him and gave him immortality, just like it did Anapishtim and his wife? So, as I said at the beginning of this episode, I wanted to touch on that because it was just really interesting, because I was thinking about the similarities between these um, two narratives, but in fact are actually one narrative, but it was just adapted by later um, cultures, um, because we now know that these cultures of Hebrew origins come from ancient Sumerian families. We know that they derived from there, and the stories that came from these places were actually passed down generation, because that was the bloodline. They were the people of this Mesopotamian culture. And a lot of times it's really hard for people to say, oh, well, this is something that, we believe, it was God. But when you look outside of that picture, is the God of the old actually the God of these older cultures? It's not anything different. It's just, it was adapted. If you look at the video I had posted on Facebook about the hold on real quick. Let me see if I can find it. There are videos I had posted. One, it was, is Yahweh a pagan Canaanite god? And it goes down and it breaks down the historical timeline of these pagan gods that were being worshipped by these people, and the stories that were coming out of these Canaanite pagan religions, okay, and were being adapted, because you got to remember, it wasn't a thing of having multiple gods. It was a thing of having multiple gods being narrowed down and being one God. And we find that in the pagan religions, the narrative is that, yes, these religions or this culture was adapted down the bloodlines, and they started forming it how they wanted it to be, that this one God is actually adapted from the old Mesopotamian culture. I'm going to post this in here. You can take a look at it. All right. If you want to click on that link, it will lead you to the video I'm talking about. And I really hope that, you guys got to look at this, and, some questions, or, if you have questions or thoughts about, wow, this is really something, and you look into it. It's really good to open up your horizon of thought, because it keeps you informed. It doesn't just keep you in the box, as I like to say, of just thinking that, well, this is all there is, and I'm just going to leave it at that because that's what I've been told. And if I get outside of that box, I'm going to be damned to hell. And, um, uh, seen as a heretic, or a person who is going against what, anybody that I talk to that believes this narrative, they're going to, think that, I'm losing my mind, or I'm going against the grain, or I'm, thinking about Satanist or devil, talk. but it's not. And it's good that we can have these discussions and talk about this stuff and look outside of the box of things that lead or have led us to this place where we're at now, because you find that these ancient cultures, okay, from these pagan religions, as we call them, pagan, that the culture that you see now in present day of Judaism, the Hebrews, were actually adapted from these ancient cultures. They were the direct bloodline through Abraham and his wife Sarah, who came from these pagan culture, ritualistic tribes. They adapted this, and over time it became one narrative. These stories that you see that are happening in the Old Testament and these things that are happening aren't just something that was just made up. It was cultured stories that were given through culture, through the bloodline, and the storytelling of the creation of man, and these great epics of humanity. And that's one thing that, if we can open our minds and realize that there is more to the story, is why I say, when I made this podcast, is there's always more to the story. There's got to be. If we keep narrowing our minds and keep, saying, oh, well, this doesn't fit what I believe. And just because this isn't what I believe, that this is fake, or, if I don't believe this, that, everything that is rooted and grounded in historical fact, okay, is wrong. You're never going to see the bigger picture, and people are always just going to be like sheep that just keep going along with the narrative. And it's really, really sad because we're missing a broader picture. And like I heard from Paul Wallace when I posted the videos, the 3 or the 5 videos of Jesus in India, it's really sad because it doesn't, you're looking at one side of the picture, when in fact these stories or these credible facts lead to an understanding of what a in-depth nature of what a person actually was, and we're missing out on a lot of the story. So I hope that you guys got a really good enjoyment out of this episode. I'm glad that you guys all came along and you guys got a chance to be a part of this. If there's anything else that you guys want to add to this, or any other subjects that you guys would like to talk about, please feel free to go ahead and post it on the page and the podcast here on YouTube, or go to Facebook and you guys can look up Seeker of the Unknown. Also, don't forget to go on to Spotify, okay, the platform Spotify, and look up Seeker of the Unknown. Okay, I will be trying to get this stream onto there, and you guys can listen to it there, because I know a lot of times people are saying, hey, bro, it's really hard for me to watch your podcast. I would rather listen to it while I'm at work, because I can't sit and watch the video. So we do have it on Spotify, and if you can get on there, subscribe it, like it. Um, Subscribe to this channel as well, like it, share it with your friends and family. We're going to be getting a lot more episodes going out, and I just want to say thank you guys again for joining me and coming along on this discussion as we talk about the Epic of Gilgamesh and the similarities between the Old Testament telling of what Gilgamesh dealt with in the storytelling of the flood, as he talked to Utnapishtim, who was said to have been in fact the biblical Noah, which was adapted from the ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablets of the storytelling of the Epic of Gilgamesh. So thank you again. I appreciate you guys for being here and coming along with me, and taking the time out to watch the podcast. It was really great. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I put this information out because I like to be able to share it with everybody else because it helps other people who um, may not be able to look at this stuff or be able to talk about it openly with anybody else. And this is a platform where we can all do that and come together and just talk and share. And as I always say, look at the information for yourself, research it for yourself. I'm just sharing in this information and giving it to you so that way you can take a look at it and read it or watch it or go out to your library and get books and study up on it yourself. Because, as I said, the history that we've all been told, the narratives that we've all been led down to believe, there is so much more to the story. And it's great because it opens up a broader picture of not only who we are as human beings and where we come from, but it helps us to understand the journey and the place of why we're here, what we were placed here for, and the capabilities that we as human beings, the bigger picture of what we're able to do, that we are meant to be so much more than what we are because of this narrow picture that we've been told of. If you keep down this path, just be quiet and don't question any narratives, or else this is going to happen to you if you don't keep doing this or believing in this narrative. But once you start looking outside of that, you start realizing, okay, this isn't so bad. There's a lot more knowledge and a lot more information that's out there that's able to be, um, that puts a bigger picture on the story itself, um, of the people and our spirit and, creation and what is actually out there, what's waiting for us out there. And that is the bigger thing I think that everybody um, should look forward to, because if we're so scared of death and we're so scared of dying because of what we've been told and this whole narrative, but the broader picture is this, that we should not fear death. We should not be scared of dying. Why? Because it is not the end, it is the beginning. And as we saw in the Epic of Gilgamesh, he knew his time was coming. He was worried about dying. He did not want to die because he saw his best friend, as we all do. We watch people that we love pass away and it breaks our heart. But you got to understand something, that the bigger picture is this: it is not the end of a story, but is just the next chapter of what is coming in the bigger scope of things. That is not the end of this story, it is just another beginning. So thank you guys for coming along. I will see you guys again soon. Don't forget to subscribe, like the channel, share it, go to Spotify, do the same. And I will see you guys then. Thank you guys again for coming along. It is always a pleasure to come and be able to sit down and just have a good time and talk with everybody. And one of these days, I'd like to get some more people to come on and talk about some subject matter. But let me know. Let me know what you think. What would you like to hear? What are some topics that you guys would like to discuss? So until then, thank you guys again. Appreciate you. It's been great. Love it. And don't forget, always seek the answers. Look for everything. Question the narratives, and don't ever just take anything that people tell you, because there's always more to the story. Thank you. Appreciate you.